Good morning. As I got myself together to give this segment, to give this today's sharing, I couldn't help but notice how much this process has become a ritual. I have to reconfigure. I have to set up my equipment, be what it may. And it's become a ritual. And that led me to notice that how easy it is for me to adapt, fall into a ritual. In many ways, for life at this point, it is rituals. Rituals that unfold. Rituals that accumulate in the moment by moment passage of time. And indeed, this passage of time, these moments, end up as the measurement of life. And I don't know if it's my practice, I don't know if it's my propensity, nature, nurture, to fall into rituals. I guess another word for rituals is perhaps isn't another definition for rituals is habits. But somehow I like rituals. Rituals means a purposeful development, while habits tend to develop through non-awareness. Perhaps it's another duality, another polarity, rituals and habits. But nonetheless, I'm really here to share today more about silence. I mentioned yesterday, if you heard, that silence was going to be the focus of the next few to several episodes of my sharing. Currently, and quite often, my wife is not here in Hualien at home with me. Her parents travel often and they live in Taipei, and she goes up there and house sits and takes care of the cat, leaving me to house sit and take care of our cat. And I'm sure she looks forward to these times. She looks forward to being in Taipei because she's a Taipei girl after all. And she looks forward to time with herself. She never verbalizes this with me, but I know that her private time is equally, if not more important to her than mine is to me. So to the outside observer, if you were here watching me, if there was a camera in the corners, you would see that I was silent continually. Because there's no one here to talk to but the cat. But I do enjoy the comfort of silence. And I never noticed that silence for me was as comfortable as old shoes. It fit. But I never really considered it silence because of the active communication going on. I was easily entertained by my own company and thoughts. And welcome this time to rest, to strengthen, to prepare for the times that I had to be out and about. I've always been very, very sensitive to the environment around me. And as long as there's not people or too many people in my environment, if it's nature, if it's the forest or the seas or the mountains, I'm at ease, perfectly comfortable and content. But when you start adding people to the mix, well, all I'll say is people in small amounts is okay. I'm overwhelmed by crowds. I just don't do well in the city. The rushing. Especially here, Taipei. Everyone seems to be in such a hurry. And sometimes I just want to yell out, "Where are you going? We're just a little island." Because rushing has never been a part of my life. I'm one of those that gets up early, gets there before any appointment that I might be unfortunate enough to have to suffer through. And most times, that's what appointments are. There's those blessed times when you meet up with someone for a cup of coffee and some conversation, some fellowship, some brotherhood or sisterhood. But most of my appointments, quite honestly, I could easily live without. Especially appointments that include me going to the big city. And trust me, I keep them to a minimum. But observable silence. When we watch others and they're busy not communicating, and you use the word busy because for most of us, even to the casual observer, we're wrapped in silence. We might have to really look or think about, indeed, we are in silence. Such is the nature of our inner dialogue. Such is the nature of our conversation from our mind. And yesterday I talked about origins. Being aware of where my words are coming from. Striving to eliminate words that come straight from the mind to the tongue, to the lips. And embracing those times when the words come from they originate in my heart and come out through my mouth, through my voice, through my sounds, through my love, basically, because that's what those words are. Words that originate from the heart come from love. Most times, words that originate in the mind and come directly to the mouth originate in observation, and are even well intended to be constructive observations. Most are not prepared to hear observations. Because I'm always watching, I'm definitely an observer. And I used to feel as a young man and on into middle age, I felt it was my duty, was my responsibility, that I was helping by sharing these insights. But realized that not only did they normally fall on deaf ears, people just didn't hear it, and when they did, they weren't prepared to hear it. And I could see many times the consequences of these words. So now I see the necessity to temper the words of the mind, to send them either direction in this circle, to send my mind talk to my heart. Let my heart do what it does before they come up and out. And this serves at least two purposes. One is it conserves energy for me. It saves energy that I can use in another way. And it makes my words more healing than cutting. We all know that words can cut us at the knees. We all know the power that words have that can wreak havoc in our lives, in our well-being. And now I consciously and unconsciously and subconsciously work to use words as agents of healing. as agents of comforting, as agents of unity, as agents of reminding all of us of our commonality, our common heritage. And this heritage is the right, the privilege, and the responsibility to remember who we are, to remember what we've always known, to remember the source that we share. To learn that the differences that we sometimes see so starkly are only elements within ourselves that we need to reconcile, that we need to discard, that we need to shine the light, that acceptance of Maya, the illusion, the grand illusion, acceptance of this truth is a light that extinguishes the darkness of loneliness, separation, division. All this comes from a silent process, even though it's tough for me to even call it silence. But silence to the outside observers, certainly it is. These processes take place in between the words, in between the thinking and the feeling and the healing of the circular pattern of sounds that somehow, by shared convention, become understandable, become words. And this silence is not the silence as I understood it, about the silence of stilling, quieting, stilling, and silencing the mind. The mind is an equal participant. The mind is working hand in hand with the sounds. So I started thinking, what am I doing in this process, this circular configuration, this circular connection from heart to mind before the words come out. What can I call this process? I've shared before that naming things for me is always a first step. People are always curious about first steps. How do you begin? And indeed, that first step could be the toughest one. For me, it's about putting a name on it, giving it a word. And as I look at this process and discover, as I had to observe myself, as I had to discern this process, I searched for a name. And names, for whatever reason, come quickly. And the name for this is putting a voice to silence. And I have further discovered that this is what I have been doing for these entire almost 100 chapters, episodes of my sharing. 100 is approaching. And this is what I've been doing. Putting a voice to silence. Giving a voice to silence. Because the process that I've shared with you, the journey, is in silence. And there was so much noise from the brain. There was so much feeling from the heart that even feelings had volume. And it had to stand back and look that these were coming from silence. Silence that would be observable to the outside witness. They would see me sitting in apparent silence. And where the disconnect came, if there was disconnect, was for me to sort out that indeed, no matter how much was going on internally, externally, I was practicing silence. So those watching, it could appear that I was in the throes of Raja Yoga, the discipline that I was somehow stilling, somehow quieting, somehow silencing the mind so that clarity could come. And all the while, I knew from years of working on this that clarity for me was elusive, only to be enjoyed for brief periods of time. And of course, like bliss, perhaps this clarity, it became more precious to me than if it was a permanent state of mind, heart, and soul. So, from silence comes sound. And I told you in my exploration of an appropriate antonym, appropriate polarity for silence, wasn't quiet, wasn't the absence of sound. And even in my own case, from apparent silence came words. I was giving a voice to silence. But this was not exactly the silence that I've come to understand is the fertile ground of clarity, communication, silence. The lack of communication was the road to silence. Allegedly. So the pundits said, at least to my understanding. And I know that my understanding is limited, of course, by experiences. So here's silence. Does it indeed have two natures? Are there two different kinds of silence? Can you sit in silence but really be immersed in inner processes, the inner voice? Yes, I've done it most of my life. Can you sit without any inner noise? This is where communication. Can you sit in total non-communication? And this is where it became problematic for me, because I understand the organicness. I understand that polarities are all about degrees of separation. They're in and of each other. They're one and the same. And it can only be if communication has the seed of silence within, and silence has the seed of communication. So, total silence is just as unlikely as total communication. And to use the other, slightly different understanding of silence, total silence, total noise, doesn't make much sense. So it's organic, which means that perhaps the path of discipline, the path of conquering, defeating, quieting the mind, can result in clarity. But to what important? How important is this clarity that you've had to sacrifice? For me personally, destroying the only useful tool I had in my exploration. Something has to be awry. And I'm sure what's awry, what's not right, somehow is my understanding of what is intended by those that say, silence the mind. I know it's a koan, and a koan is nothing more than a psychological trick to help you understand the boundaries of logic. You have to go beyond logic. So clarity resides beyond logic. Logic inevitably fails. Logic can help, can point, but leaving logic, finding revelation, being inspired, is the state of mind that you want to end up in, the state of being. See, I can't really separate being, mind, body, and soul. It's part of the package that's available to us, the blessing that we share. So what I've decided to do is I want to transcribe these videos. I want to put them together in the format of a book. And I'm looking at a big chore because I have 60 or more hours of spoken words, words that I've shared with you. But I want to transcribe them and put them together in a book, because some people, books are useful, more useful than watching this, more useful than this format of looking at me and listening to me. And the title will be the title of today's episode, today's adventure: putting a voice to silence. Because this has all been about my journey towards finding clarity. Where will my journey take me? Well, it seems to be taking me to a deeper understanding through use of the koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping? It comes to mind immediately, perhaps the most famous koan. Is it silence? Is it the absence of sound? Or is it an exercise for our brain that will ultimately result in us not finding the answer in logic or thought? It resides in some other realm.